Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing good. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Happy
As
July.
Yes, as we sit down to record this, we're just coming out of the July 4th weekend. I hope all of our listeners had a great time. Chip, I know you got to spend some more time with your new granddaughter.
I did. We got to go see her on Friday, and my son and daughter-in-law moved to Stamford early April, and they're fortunate enough to be living in a nice high-rise apartment. And they're on the fifth floor, which is the floor that the outdoor pool is on. And my son is an avid swimmer and has been taking my granddaughter in every single day. So she's, absolutely loving it. But it's just a wonderful place to be. And my high for the weekend, she's going to be 7 months old this week, and I actually got her laughing for the first time. So I did
That's fantastic.
a lot of likes.
Excellent. That's a great way to spend the holiday.
Nothing beats a baby laughing.
All right. Well, this week we've got our special guest, Marc Kitz. Marc is a sales coach, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with people having to sell, how things are changing, and hopefully we'll have some good advice for those of you who aren't really comfortable selling. So, Marc, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Glad you could be here. And why don't we start out and tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like you, I grew up in New York, actually on the South Shore of Long Island, New York. I went to University of Rhode Island, played tennis there, and continue to try to play as much as my body lets me, and have been in various sales roles as an individual contributor, as a coach, mentor, sales manager for over 37 years.
Excellent. So to start off, we've talked on numerous occasions on this podcast, in the Modern Observer Group blog, how all of us are salespeople in one form or another, whether it's a job candidate trying to sell themselves to an employer, a business owner absolutely needs to be able to sell their products or services. But a lot of us don't come from a sales background. So for those of us who have trouble identifying as salespeople or don't have that experience, how do we get over that mindset hump? How do we start thinking about sales?
Well, it's a great question, and as I'm sure, then some people that may be hesitant or concerned about it, there's this old sort of negative perception about salespeople being pushy, and the I learned from two vice presidents of sales that I reported to in my career that it's much more about how much you listen. So the quote from both of them was amazingly the same words: use your ears and your mouth in the proportion you have them. So, or more eloquently said by Stephen Covey, who's, I'm sure many of your listeners know, seek first to understand and then be understood. So what I've found is that selling has much more to do with listening, doing homework before a meeting about the people you're meeting with or and the company, so you can almost just sort of rename it into networking and research, in a lot of ways, because it's so much has to do with listening and doing the prep work.
Yeah, in your website, you talk about building confidence, learning from mentors, transitioning from selling and technology. You've been in this field for 30 plus years, and you took a foundational course, which is very near and dear to Eric's and my hearts, which is the Dale Carnegie courses. As far as I'm concerned, that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is probably the most important book ever written as far as what salesmen need to do, because you mentioned listening, and what this is listening and responding accordingly, honoring the sign that every person is really wearing that says, "What's in it for me?" So if you could expound a little bit on what you learned from Dale Carnegie, and the bottom line is the key word is influence. People basically follow what you do, not what you say.
I excuse me. I absolutely agree, and that and those courses that I took, Chip, back early in my career, really gave me a foundation to work from, and a sense of confidence that I hadn't had. And I was 26 when I took them. So it took me a few years to sort of get that sense of, that a real sense of confidence. And it really got me focused on doing what my vice president of sales was looking for me to do, is to really listen and pay attention and think about what the people I'm calling on were thinking about.
So, we've said listening is so important. And this is obviously not just for sales, it's in life and networking and business. Whatever you're doing, listening is important. But how do you move from that listening to making a sale rather than being an unpaid consultant? I know that's a problem a lot of people that I've dealt with have. They do a lot of unpaid consulting, and they have problems making that transition to a close.
Well, so part of the listening and the research is understanding where the customer's challenges are, um, both at the contact level and as a company. And if you can align what they understand about the objective the customer's trying to reach, and the challenges that they're facing in trying to get there. If you can align what you're offering, and you also make sure you understand the decision process and the criteria and the people involved, then you're much more likely to make that transition. So you notice I didn't say it was like hard closing, and it's not a lot of fancy questions. It has all to do with understanding those goals, objectives, challenges, and how the decision process works.
Yeah, and you have key topics in your website that you go over with people, differentiating yourself from your competition and prospecting and so on and so forth. I would imagine, obviously a big part of it for the client itself is coming up with a really sound proposal as far as how they're presenting themselves too, because a lot of, I would imagine, potential clients out there have the same problem that Eric just mentioned, and that's really doing things for free for people, but not having really something that they can leverage into a sale. So, do you analyze, what your potential clients are doing as far as, their approach to basically presenting themselves in the first place?
Well, excuse me. Yeah, absolutely. It's there are. I've had a couple of situations where the the research was the prep work was maybe being done, but wasn't being shared. In the proposals you're talking about, Chip. So it's important. Most of us are competing with 5, 10, maybe 20 other companies. So it's important to show the customer that you're listening by sort of repeating back your understanding of what they were trying to achieve, and what issues they were having. So I've seen other situations where the company will be focused on a sort of providing a high value solution, Chip, but then the proposal, if you will, isn't even really a proposal. It's a rudimentary quote. So is it that huge mismatch between the image they're trying to promote and what that document really conveys? Sometimes as you know, documents travel. You're not always presenting it, and it needs to kind of speak for itself.
Yeah, isn't it important that the document you're putting together, and I do want to point out, I've had a lot of salespeople talk to me, and they're putting together these massive documents because they think that the bulk of the document is going to give them gravitas. But most of the folks that I've talked about on the other side who are being sold to, they don't want a 60, 70 page document. They want something that's 4 or 5 pages and gives them everything they need really quickly. But isn't it important, for however long this document is, that it shows the potential client how you can solve their problem?
Well, absolutely, absolutely, and that needs to be there's sort of a natural. I agree. By the way, people aren't going to read; they're going to scan, right? So you give them a few pages, and the natural flow is first, here's maybe a little summary of your company. Then it's here's what I heard in terms of what you're trying to achieve or the challenges. Here's our solution and how it solves the problems, right? And then maybe there's a financial justification or something like that, or a summary of how moving forward with the solution you're offering will resolve the issues or achieve the goals in a timely manner. So it is important, and a lot of times that's left out.
Yeah, basically, when it comes to the process going, and I think Dale Carnegie kind of subtly talks about this in his book. The bottom line is, when you start listening to people and hearing what they're talking about, you're actually asking questions of them that could possibly lead them into your way of thinking without them even knowing it. And then they finally see the value of what you're talking about because it becomes their idea. So, I mean, coaching in that essence, to me, that book is really about coaching also. And what you're doing is you're applying those approaches to subtly, get your potential client into that mode of mind. But the bottom line is, these days, especially, people are looking for brief is better, some quick benefit tagline, and so on and so forth, to get people interested. And if you ask them that question up front, Dale Carnegie style, and you get them to say, wouldn't this be nice, and so on and so forth, I think that's a big part of the process, especially these days.
And in addition, Chip, because it's there isn't a lot of face-to-face selling going on. Probably won't be for a while. It's going to be a gradual thing. So it is harder to read body language on video conferencing, and if you're fortunate enough to have to be connecting with a customer in that way. So planning ahead, as you're indicating, what questions you're going to ask, and if you look at that book, there's a big focus on asking open-ended questions. So you kind of put together the research and the prep on the company and the contacts, and your questions sort of naturally would come out of that.
Yeah, I mean, as you're working with clients on this, I mean, what you're really doing is coaching them in the sales technique too, by getting them to do the same thing, because that's the approach that works. If everybody followed that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, there'd be a whole lot more successful, happy people out there.
That's true. It's also why it's probably still doing very well from a sales perspective in terms of the book.
Yeah, that's still a bestseller. We actually went through it on our Success Showcase bookshelf. It's a fantastic book, and whether you're focused on sales or not, it's a good read, and it's a fantastic way to actually build your business and personal relationships. Now, I want to step back a little bit. You had mentioned briefly how things are changing now. You're not doing much face-to-face sales anymore. How, if at all, do you recommend people adapt to our COVID environment? I mean, with video calls and not having that face-to-face contact?
Well, boy, that's there's a lot. There's a lot in that, and there's from one perspective, that you say, what about prospecting if you're trying to find, trying to connect with customers, and I'd say that some companies it'll might be even easier because so many people working from home, so people are answering their own phones. Some companies have figured out how to forward phones and so on. So part of the adapting when it comes to prospecting um, is understanding when people are likely to be available, when they're relaxed and more open to conversation, and you try to do that homework with maybe other people that have called on the same company or other contacts you may have in that in the company. The other, I should, and another adaptation is trying to move a sale forward. Previously, you could meet in a conference room with, let's say, there were 6 or 7 people, Eric, that were involved in a decision process, and you could have one meeting and watch the body language and make adjustments and sort of think on your feet. And now that's not happening, obviously, in person, and so decision processes can take longer. So you have to act as a quarterback, as a focal point, as a relay, meaning you have a conversation with one, maybe 2 people, and then you try to connect with the other people and sort of knit it together. So I would say the adaptation is got to be a little bit more patient, and even step up your attention to detail even more. And that, what pulls that together is your ability to synthesize the information and communicate effectively with the people that are involved in the decision process.
We've been talking a lot about listening to the people and getting the message across, solving problems, but this is all really the second phase of selling, the first being prospecting who you're going to sell to. Are there specific processes or tools that you recommend, especially if people are not comfortable with prospecting or just getting into it? How can they, move forward and really make their prospecting a useful tool rather than just guessing at who's going to be able to use their product or service?
Well, the first thing, that goes back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, which was, doing some of the homework. And LinkedIn, certainly the premier, way to see whom you are connected with, or could be, easily connected with, maybe with some help, with key contacts in the target customers that you're going with. And that's how, a big part of how, Eric, that sort of becomes networking as opposed to selling. You just think of it as opening relationships there. Then a next part of that is, as you're having those conversations with people that you're trying to get some help connected to, try to get some insight about how the people that you're pursuing, what they're like, and how they make decisions, and what they do for fun, and so on. And that'll provide some valuable information when it comes time to making a call. And particularly for people that are not familiar or comfortable selling, is spend some extra time preparing both questions you want to ask now that you've gathered some information about them. Hopefully you have some things you have in common, and questions you anticipate getting asked. And I've seen that work very well when you kind of put those two sort of elements of effort together.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd also like to mention, again, we said earlier, listen. That listening isn't just in a sales meeting. You need to be listening all the time because as you're talking to coworkers, friends, relatives, you never know when someone is going to say something that triggers, hey, wait a minute, that's a problem that our product or service can help you with. So you do need to be open to these opportunities and always listening to what's going on around you.
Agreed. And I think it's also the more you do that, the more comfortable and more frequently you'll connect those dots. So sometimes what can help in getting if someone's looking to kind of get their selling effort going is to take a look at 4, 5, 6 sort of success stories, let's say, that they've had with existing customers, and what issues you could be a simple spreadsheet, Eric, with what issues did it resolve for those customers, and that could a document to keep in front of them as they're going through their day or making calls, and those are good quick sort of reminders for someone who's trying to get going.
Absolutely. We've talked on other podcasts about telling stories. And as a sales tool, being able to tell the story of how your product or service solved a problem for a business similar to that you're pitching, it's a very useful tool. So you do need to be able to pick up on how you're helping other customers and use that when you're talking to new potential customers.
And I think that's a great thought, and certainly that if as you're trying to contact a customer and you're in a conversation, that if you have success stories in in similar same industry, similar company size, that takes some pressure off of the people that you're trying to contact, because no one wants to be first. There's a lot of perceived risk there. So those are having summaries of success stories in front of you. Also, great thought, Eric, would be of tremendous value as you go forward with your selling effort.
Right. Being able to prove you have a track record solving these problems does really put potential clients at ease. Going back to the 60s, there was an old saying, nobody ever got fired for buying from IBM. Because they had the track record. Everybody knew what they could do.
Yeah, I heard that a few times since my dad worked there for about 30 years.
So, yeah, we obviously the way that we all met was through networking, which is nothing more than relationships building. As most of the people out there know, I used to be a B&I assistant director, and really the S word that people frown upon just because it's got a bad rap is selling. But what we're really doing out in what we're doing as far as providing products and services is we're sharing. And if we can put that across to people, just by doing the things that we're talking about, listening and so on and so forth, it's so important. Obviously, while we're physically distanced right now, we talked a little bit about using Zoom and doing virtual meetings and so on and so forth. One of the things that you talk about in your website is deriving business in a new territory. And the bottom line is what this is doing for us right now and what the World Wide Web has been doing for us for years, but we're just realizing it now because we're using it more, is really the whole world is our potential market. So this opens up a whole lot of new different ways to prospect in different areas and so on, and develop new ways to reach them. And obviously using the web to kind of back yourself up. Testimonials are a wonderful part of networking meetings. Possibly putting together testimonials on your web page and things like that. It's training people and using this in a new way, I would imagine, is a challenge, but it's got to be a lot of fun for you as far as talking to people about that.
Well, certainly, and I think that that anyone who's trying to, who isn't, trying to grow their business, but has the, sort of the focus and on trying to start a new territory, it fits right in with what I've been advising a lot of companies about. It's just now is a great time to get after it. So that when, it's not if, it's just when things kind of open up more, that many more people will know about the value your company can provide and what kind of a responsive, accountable salesperson you are.
Exactly. Using the Zoom, other video conferencing, and even just old-fashioned phone calls, it really does allow you to open up a much bigger territory. You're not relying on who you can get to meet with, on a regular basis, or who you can actually physically get to. So you really should be taking advantage of that new reach that we all seem to have.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if you whatever industry you might be in, you take a few minutes to think about what companies are you actively partnering with, or that do you sort of live symbiotically in the same accounts where you're already successful, and they are certainly very likely to be interested in growing their business maybe in a new territory as well. So particularly now, people are more interested than ever in sharing ideas. So I think your ability to gather information that will help opening a new territory, starting business in a new territory, should be easier. Not that it doesn't require effort and some hard work and determination. That there's a good collaborative environment out there.
All right, we're hitting the end of our time. So, Marc, if somebody wants to get a hold of you and utilize your services, how can they do so?
Well, a couple of things. So, my website is marckitz.com or marckitz.com. So, lots of articles. Feel free to sign up right on the bottom of the homepage as a subscriber. Email is mark@marckitz.com. And my phone number is 860-836-8979. Feel free to call.
Fantastic. Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway from this episode?
Wow, there's lots of things that we can talk about when it comes to marketing and sales and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is we are in very exciting and very intimidating times. And, the most important thing is obviously do your homework, do your proper prospecting, come up with a really, really good message. And then basically, just like Marc was talking about, go out there, listen with people, have an open mind, and kind of coach them through how to get the best thing done for themselves to kind of grow their business through using you.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think for me, the big takeaways are the things we've talked about for a long time. It's listen to what's going on, listen to what people have to say. Sales is about a relationship. So do your homework, learn about people, and listen to what they're telling you. You've been listening to The Success Case. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.